Hello, I'm Niall Paterson. Welcome to this special edition of the Sky News Daily podcast, where we are looking back on 2023 in science and technology. From climate change to the space race, from AI to e-commerce. I mean, the past 12 months have been full of stories with the power to change the world and perhaps on occasion blow it up as well. Who better to reflect upon the past year with than our science and technology editor, Tom Clarke. Tom, good to see you.
Thanks, Neil.
Do you know what? Why don't we start with, I think, one of, if not the biggest stories, tech stories of the year, artificial intelligence. It seemingly came out of nowhere this year.
It did feel like that, didn't it? It's interesting. We were sitting here 12 months ago, almost exactly, and I think I can be proud to say that I did say AI was going to be interesting.
You did.
I thought this Chat GPT, there's a big deal, but I don't think any of us could have forecast just how spectacular its sort of rise was. But more so the reaction to it, the hype and hysteria around what it might mean.
So where did it come from? Now, presumably, all of this stuff, and you mentioned ChatGPT there, which I think will be most people's kind of point of contact with AI. I mean, that didn't just come out of nowhere. I mean, clearly, people have been working on this stuff for an awful long time.
Yeah, and I was asking myself, why wasn't I more across this? We knew these language models had been in development, and I think I and others felt a little bit reassured in that it really did happen quite fast. And it happened because OpenAI, which was one of the leaders in terms of certainly throwing more computing power at this thing, they had got some money from Microsoft, has invested in them, and they chucked a lot of computing power and a lot of data at their model. GPT-3 as it was then, I think 3.5 by Christmas. GPT-4 came out in the early part of the new year. And what we saw there was the rules of exponentials. Just like we saw with COVID, when we were looking there was a few hundred cases, and we were thinking, yeah, but it's not, I mean, how can it possibly infect everyone? And then before you know it, it's going off the scale. And we saw the same thing happen with these language models. You give them enough extra data, you give them exponentially more computing power, remarkable things start happening quite quickly that people didn't understand.
I mean, I don't know if you intended to scare me absolutely there by comparing the advance of AI to the global pandemic that was COVID-19. But just explain, I mean, you keep saying the language models. Tell me why artificial intelligence, as it is currently constituted, tell me why it's nothing more than, a search engine. A really smart search engine, but a search engine nonetheless.
Yeah, it depends. I think it depends how optimistic or pessimistic you're thinking. Yeah, a lot of people will tell you, look, they're just clever tools that predict what the next word's going to be. And you plug them into a search engine, as some of them do. So Microsoft have put ChatGPT now talks to Bing, its search engine. Combine the two, you've just got a really powerful search engine. But when you start throwing all this extra computational power at them, when you design them in such a way where they can choose how they solve a particular problem or navigate a particular question, they do throw up unexpected results. And I think the reason for the big backlash, I would call it hysteria around these models, is there were certain things that emerged that people weren't sure where they came from. These sort of emergent behaviours, they describe them as, where unpredictable things are happening, and potentially powerful unpredictable things. You give a program like this the ability to write computer code and to infer various things. That gets worrying. I think what we saw happen over the course of the year was that anxiety having a sort of headlong collision with reality, and people are starting to get a bit more of a kind of sage, wise assessment of really how powerful they are.
But isn't that just because this year has been the first time that people have actively engaged with AI software, have thought about it practically? I mean, you had Elon Musk, of all people, suggesting that at some point he did say, admittedly, in the distant future, AI is going to take our jobs.
Yeah, and I think we can see exactly that happening, but we have to keep some perspective around it. And I think that's what's hard to get. It's hard to get that perspective.
Because we've all watched Terminator.
We've all watched Terminator.
Know what Skynet is.
We've all watched Terminator, but also things are moving really fast. And I think that's the thing that's unique about the AI as a technology, the development of AI, is we got to a point where the amount of computing power, the way cloud infrastructure works, the way you can pile on the extra sort of mathematical turbo boosters, that surprised a lot of people. It left us struggling to catch up. But we've got to remember, it is a technology like any other. We saw colossal job replacement through technologies. Look at the Industrial Revolution, etc.
Exactly.
But what we found was other jobs emerging. I don't think it is too naive to say that, yes, of course, AI is going to replace jobs, but it's not going to, put us all out of work and we'll just be slaves to some higher silicon entity. At least not for the next couple of years.
Okay, well,
let's say that.
Let's see where we are this time next year, Tom. Remarkable.
That's the smartest thing to say.
Another thing that was moving incredibly quickly, at least in the initial stages, Elon Musk's massive rocket. It went off and then it exploded.
Yes.
Tell me, what has he been going on? Because the man has revolutionised the way in which space exploration, such as we do right now, is performed.
No doubt. And I think it is remarkable. We'll come on to the big rocket in a second. I mean, that's significant in an important and slightly different way. Look at what he's just been doing with his regular rockets, the Falcon class. SpaceX has launched more rockets this year, twice as many rockets this year as its next nearest rival, the Chinese. They have transformed the kind of efficiency. Oh, and they've had a 100% success rate. They've not lost a single of their workhorse rockets. That's remarkable, transformative. It's commercializing space. Let's not give lots of credit to Elon Musk. He set up that company. He's had the drive to hire the right people to do it. He does benefit from a significant amount of government contracts. This is not money he's just engineered from nowhere. He's very much part of that military-industrial complex that we talk about with the US. However, they've done a transformative thing with access to space there. You can expect to see that just continue. The big rocket, though, is significant. It is just such a massive thing that if it succeeds, and it hasn't done yet, but I think looking at his track record, he'll probably make sure it does. That is America's ticket back to the moon. In Elon Musk's mind, this is
going further, isn't it?
Going further. And this is where we start to see the overlap between his big rocket and AI, this idea that we can somehow escape the not just the confines of gravity, but the confines of sort of biology, and we can live successfully on another planet and have our mind backed up in the cloud. Reasons why some people are quite concerned about the tech overlords' level of power as they think about those realms.
But you don't need Elon Musk's deep pockets, though, to be involved in space exploration at the moment, as ably demonstrated by India going to the moon.
I think, to be honest, although Elon Musk's big rocket was engineering...
So sorry for giving people that image.
Really impressive.
Yeah.
I think the thing that really stood out to me, the big space story of this year was India's successful landing on the moon. This is something that we know is extremely difficult to do. We even saw Russia, which before then was the second only country when it was the USSR to land successfully on the moon, failed to do so with a lot of experience and money. Yet here comes India, the very inexpensive bid, a simple but elegantly engineered lander, and land on a part, not just land on the moon, land on a part of the moon no one's ever been to before, and not just that, survive, carry out the full mission, send all that data back. Huge success, and I think a signal of where we're going to see space is going to open up. India is a very fast-growing economy, and will want a slice of the sort of space commercialization pie, and this gives them a ticket now to that table, which we've not seen in outside of China. We've not really seen the developing world at all. So that's a really significant step, and I think one to watch.
Let's change tack slightly, because of course you have just recently returned from Dubai, COP28. We got an agreement. We've talked about this on the podcast before, but just remind everyone what actually we got there, because it wasn't an agreement to end all fossil fuel use, but it was a suggestion that is the direction of travel, and there are no U-turns from this point on.
Yeah. I mean, you could, if you were sort of cynical, you could step back and say, well, we haven't got much more from COP than we have ever before. It was a very incremental step forward. I'd argue differently. I think that the fact that we finally, after 30 years of these negotiations, 28 COPs, have an acknowledgement that fossil fuels must be phased out in writing, globally agreed, is a really important thing.
It is, but but they can roll back on it. I mean, we have been here before, have we not?
Totally.
And certain US president throws his toys out the pram, and we're back to square one.
Yeah, there are enough sort of caveats in that agreement to put an open cast coal mine in. Do you know what I mean? You could literally, and believe me, people are intending to do exactly that. It's not going to substantially change the amount of fossil fuels you can extract or burn in the medium term. But what it does do, I really think it does send a signal to finance ministers and presidents and prime ministers around the world. Fossil fuels are on their way out. Do you think there's more for your country and your economy to gain by being an early part of the transition or not? And if you look at what the science is telling us, you look at the threats that climate change are posing to us, if that message has got through, it could actually help stimulate the kind of transition that we need. And going back to exponentials again, we are going to need to see an exponential increased investment in those things if we're going to avoid dangerous warming in the coming few decades.
But given the mantra from this government and indeed previous governments has been, look, the UK has been a world leader in this. We've pushed away from carbon in a way that other parts of the developed world have not. But the other side of that coin has always been, look, we can take advantage here. We can invest in green technologies. And yet, what is this government's position? We've had a rollback on commitments about electric vehicles and petrol guzzlers and all the rest of it. We've got new North Sea oil exploration licenses being granted.
I think, and without wanting to sound too political at all, I think we've seen a real failure of leadership here. A real failure of kind of clear statement of your political direction. In Rishi Sunak's speech, where he sort of did a bit of a reset on net zero, he did try to say, we still are leading, we're still committed to net zero, but we all heard it. In there was language around we shouldn't move faster than anybody else. Why should I punish our economy, etc. Very mixed messages. And what we saw at the climate summit is they really matter. The UK was not able to hold its head high in the way it had before. And what really struck me actually is the UK has more than led the way on this. I mean, in terms of the machinery of these climate summits, we've been integral in that since the beginning. In fact, they paid tribute to one of our lead climate negotiators at the very beginning of COP, who died this year unexpectedly, and honoured him as one of the people who helped deliver the Paris Agreement. We were fundamental, and we still have civil servants who are really devoted and dedicated to this, yet they weren't getting the glory that they normally enjoy, and I think that's partly because of those mixed messages. Yet at the same time, and supported by action as well. The rest of the world wants to see rich countries who've set these ambitious goals, like the UK has, and we haven't totally rode back on them, deliver. Yet right now, where are the policies that are going to get us there? Not too clear yet. Although I must, if we're here, give the government credit. Only just now, just before Christmas, we've had a package of energy efficiency measures that will show we are, in many ways, still being very progressive and more ambitious than others. But the language has failed us.
See, this is the thing. This time last year, you and I were talking about climate change, and there was still, I have to say, a degree of denialism around at that point. With the evidence of what we have seen with our own eyes in 2023, the deniers, those who say that man-made climate change is a false phenomenon, a false flag, whatever you want to call it, they seem to be dwindling in number. However, they seem to have hitched their wagon to net zero is going to cost us all far too much money. Why are we being asked to pay for this? You're putting this on the poorest countries in the world and the poorest individuals in the world as well.
It's a very interesting shift. It's kind of inevitable if you look around and think about the fact, this summer in the North Hemisphere, all around the world, we had 50-degree heat waves on every continent pretty much in the same week. We saw evidence of our warming planet undeniably. So that was bound to happen. But yes, this shift of a kind of new form of denialism about how are we going to do it? I think in COP we heard the word pragmatism a lot. How do we pragmatically transition away from fossil fuels?
None of which is to suggest that there isn't a debate to be had about the pace with which we kind of move towards getting rid of fossil fuels. There is a debate certainly to be had, but there is not. I'm phrasing this as a question to you, but there is not a debate to be had about the necessity.
No. I don't think that. I don't think anybody now can in any way justify that and show evidence to support their position. Do you know what I mean? We just have, clearly the way the planet's responding to the greenhouse gas being put into the atmosphere is basically completely in line with what scientists have forecast. One of the, I suppose, the good news is, the absolute worst case doomsday, 6, 7, 8 degrees of warming that was out there before, and as the models were a bit vaguer, we're not going to get there, but we are going to see. We saw pretty awful living conditions on planet Earth for humans at 1.2 degrees this summer, above industrial average. Within a decade, we might be at 1.5 degrees, and we're going to overshoot that now. We know, even if we did absolutely everything, pandemic levels of sort of economic shutdown to drop below zero, we are going to overshoot 1.5. We're going to have an uncomfortable few decades. And how do you do that transition quickly? How do you do it equitably? And also fighting the rearguard action of how are we going to insulate our economies against the trouble we're going to see?
I want to try and end on something of a positive note, given all the doom and gloom that we have been discussing in the end of the world and the coming apocalypse and all the rest of it. Malaria. We got a second vaccine.
That's right.
It's incredible.
It is incredible. It is a situation which, for many years now, some people doubted we'd ever see. Despite decades of research on malaria vaccines, will they ever be effective enough to reduce the burden of this disease?
I mean, how many people die a year?
2022, 600,000+ people died of malaria. And you put that in the context of COVID, albeit mortality was much higher for that short period of the pandemic, but as a chronic drag on development and on economy and on people's lives and families' lives in areas that are affected by malaria, it's a colossal burden, and it's been going on, for millennia. So to have some hope that we might make meaningful strides on combating malaria is just incredible, especially given some real improvements had been made through the early 2000s in terms of reduction in transmission using things like bed nets and new insecticide treatments. That was starting to wane. The amount of fatigue amongst donor countries to the WHO was really setting in, especially. So the fact this is coming along now is also a huge boost in that regard. So we've got 2 malaria vaccines, both now being deployed, and I think next year we are going to see the benefits that those vaccines bring. We know they're going to work. It's a question of how much benefit they bring, how do the economics stack out. They should be cheap. Accessibility might be an issue, getting them to where they need, getting the volumes manufactured, but real hope in terms of a meaningful inroad into reducing death and suffering from malaria.
When you say that, are we genuinely talking about the fact that in maybe a handful of years' time, malaria might not be an issue anymore?
I don't think, given the way malaria works, it's not a simple virus. It's a parasite that has a genome that can adapt and evolve. It's a slippery customer. I think the hope for malaria eradication is probably too much. But if you can suppress transmission enough, you could really see improvements. And that's really what we want to see from these vaccines. How do they actually affect the transmission, the dynamics, and all that kind of thing? But along with other measures, maybe that improvement will be enough to make people think, this is a battle we could win. It might stimulate a bit more enthusiasm, a bit more effort. We could see real shifts. And obviously, one of these ideas of a kind of one health approach with public health globally, if you can improve people's lives, that has direct impacts onto the economy, onto jobs and education for kids.
And Africa could do with it, right?
And that might bring development benefits. And obviously, once you have more development, once you have better infrastructure, diseases like malaria are easier to control as well. So these things could go hand in hand. I think there's a lot to hope for there.
Tom, given how well you did with your predictions back in 2022, why don't we just cast our eye forward for the final 2 minutes and think about what we are going to see? And let's start with climate. I mean, one way or t'other, 2024 is going to be a big year in terms of the weather.
Yeah, I think I don't want to be too gloomy, but we are, because of the El Nino that is almost certainly driving 2023's record-breaking
This is this weather
temperature.
pattern, isn't it? Yeah.
That's right. So this is a phenomenon in the Pacific Ocean, but it basically means a lot of heat that's stored in the oceans gets pushed up to the surface, and that heat has to go somewhere. It goes into the atmosphere, and it gets felt in our weather. We've certainly seen the fact that 2023 is the hottest year in recorded history is largely due to the El Nino effect, we think. It was going to be up there anyway, but the boost it's been given. The current forecast from climatologists is that 24 is going to be even warmer. So we could see the record get broken again in 2024. I suppose the good news is El Ninos are cyclical. It will pass. Things might cool off a little bit, but it's just the wiggle in the noise. The general signal will continue to be a warming one. Oh. But we'll see, unfortunately, I think we'll see more heat-related weather events and storminess.
Great. Thanks, Tom. So let's end on a really positive note. AI, where's that going to go in 2024? I, for one, welcome the arrival of our robot overlords. What about you?
Do you know what? Likewise, I want to see. So what we are going to see in 2024, a lot of excitement, a lot of money has been piled into AI now in forms of investment. Access to the materials, the tools to do it, like these super powerful graphics computer chips that we need. There's been a short supply of those. They're tight. They will. So there's been a bit of a delay, but we are going to see in the early parts of next year these new AI models hit the stage. We're going to start to see, and I would predict we are going to see another quantum leap, exponential hop in how they.
Fantastic!
Yes.
Looking forward to it.
Oh, I'd like to hope, though, given all the fuss there's been, and don't forget, our Prime Minister convened a safety summit here in the UK to talk about these risks. We saw the same with in the US. I think we're going to see some of these AI companies be a little bit more cautious in how they unleash these things on the world. But from a scientific point of view, what are these things going to be capable of? Are these emergent properties we got hinted at in things like GPT-4, are they terrifying enough to mean that the future of human dominance on this planet is uncertain? Or do we actually learn a bit more about the reality of these models and where they're taking us? I think that's really going to be one to watch.
Well, Tom, I will see you in 2024, or perhaps in the Matrix, depending on how artificial intelligence goes. Thank you very much indeed.
My absolute pleasure.
And of course, much, much more on all of the topics that we have covered on the Daily itself. But that is your lot for this very special edition. Looking back on 2023, we'll see you very soon.